George Pickens is one of the most physically gifted wide receivers in the NFL. He has a similar prototype to DK Metcalf, AJ Brown. They're just physically imposing. You don't want to guard any one of these dudes one-on-one with no safety help over the top because that pretty much is suicide. And the Cowboys acquiring George Pickens for a third-round pick and a stealth soda from the Steelers, to me, is one of the best acquisitions that Jerry Jones has made since the Cowboys acquired Amari Cooper a few years ago. That's the kind of player that the Cowboys are getting out of George Pickens. And we haven't really seen what George Pickens is fully capable of due to the poor quarterback situation that he had to deal with in Pittsburgh. Despite the amount of criticism that Dak Prescott receives, the majority of times he's a top 10 quarterback. His issue is once you get to the playoffs, he just doesn't deliver. But with you getting George Pickens now, you make things a lot easier for Dak Prescott in terms of him being able to execute and be more consistent. Because now, with him pairing up with CeeDee Lamb, you have arguably the best receiving duo in the NFL at the moment. With the skill set that George Pickens brings, being so good at winning those one-on-one 50-50 ball matchups, it's going to take a lot of attention off CeeDee Lamb. And that's going to help open up the rest of this Cowboys offense. George Pickens is one of those kinds of players that opposing defenses have to key in on. And when you key in on him, what does that mean for CeeDee Lamb? What does that mean for the other playmakers that the Cowboys have in this offense? And with George Pickens getting traded from Pittsburgh, as a Steeler fan, I'm still really upset by it. He was my favorite Steeler over these last couple of years to watch. He has been the best player on Pittsburgh's team since he got drafted. But there is a reason why Mike Tomlin pulled the trigger on making this move happen. And it wasn't Amar Khan, the Steelers GM, or anybody in the Steelers ownership. This was Mike Tomlin's call to get rid of George Pickens. And Mike Tomlin is perceived to be the best player-friendly coach in the National Football League. And if he throws his hands up and he's willing to get rid of you, there is some red flags that the Cowboys have to acknowledge about making this move to get George Pickens. He's like a soda bottle. When you get him involved and he's making plays, you don't have anything to worry about. But if you go into the third quarter and CeeDee Lamb has 14 targets for 152 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns, and George Pickens only has 3 catches for 19 yards, you shake that soda bottle up, and eventually, when you crack the top open off that thing, you're going to get a lot of crap coming out. It's going to get really messy and sticky, and that's when George Pickens starts to crash out. When you don't get him involved, he tends to tap out of the game mentally, where he won't put a lot of effort in the blocking and the run game. He'll half-ass routes. He'll get into it with the opposing team. He'll commit dumb and costly penalties. And that's why the Steelers were willing to move on from George Pickens. And the Steelers have been a team that has always rolled the dice on big personalities at the wide receiver position, and they've always have had a good sense of when it's time to move on. From Antonio Brown, Martavis Bryant, Juju Smith-Schuster, Chase Claypool, Deontay Johnson, the majority of times when the Steelers get rid of a wide receiver, you see their production greatly diminish on their new team. Now, George Pickens is a lot better than all of those receivers outside of Antonio Brown. And from a talent standpoint, him being on the Dallas Cowboys should work. But George Pickens is a highly volatile player. And if you aren't allowing him to make plays, then he just gets disinterested in the game. And even when he does make big plays, he has a tendency to negate them with the emotional penalties that he has a high frequency of committing. And he's one of those players that plays with his heart on his sleeve. He gets really emotional, and sometimes his emotions get the best of him. Sometimes he may crash out. It's not a matter of if he'll crash out on the Cowboys, it's a matter of when. And for Dallas, you are going to have to hope that the good outweighs the bad with George Pickens. And his character concerns are a huge issue. He kind of has had character red flags about him dating back to his time at Georgia when he was playing college ball. And we've seen those character issues flare up in some of the worst ways during his time in Pittsburgh. And the Cowboys are no stranger to getting these players that have these kind of character issues like George Pickens. That's kind of what the Cowboys are known for. Sometimes they take these players in like George Pickens and it works out, and sometimes it backfires in their faces. But personally, I feel George Pickens is going to have a great season for the Cowboys. From a personnel standpoint, this move makes a lot of sense. You finally got that big, elite, deep threat. You got that menace that you've been looking for. You got somebody that has a mean mentality that fans kind of have been wanting to have on this offense for the last couple of years. You got that. You got somebody that's going to make it easy on Dak Prescott when everything is going wrong. He can just say, fuck it. George Pickens is somewhere down there and he can come down with it. And Dak Prescott is one of the better deep ball throwers in the NFL. So pairing him with George Pickens makes a lot of sense. But from a personality standpoint, the Cowboys acquiring George Pickens puts a lot of stress on Dak Prescott. You already saw last year before he got hurt, he was having blowups on the sideline with CeeDee Lamb snapping on him, not getting the ball enough. Now he's going to have another mouth to feed that's going to be popping off on him, voicing his displeasure if he's not making plays and he's not getting targets. And that's why this move is high risk, high reward, because you're hoping that George Pickens can make a 180. But the chances of that are pretty low. At this point, George Pickens is what he is. Now, he's been on the press run as of late, saying that all he wants to do is win and he's not looking to get paid. All that sounds good until you're in the middle of the game, tempers are flaring, emotions are flying high, and George Pickens just goes off the rails. That's just the kind of player that he is. He's a crash out, and he will crash out occasionally for the Cowboys. You just hope that it doesn't ruin the team chemistry and that you can overcome those crash out moments and still find ways to win games. There were a few games that George Pickens costed the Pittsburgh Steelers over the last couple of years with unnecessary penalties. He'll make a big play. He'll have it somewhat negated with a unsportsmanlike conduct penalty. He can get into scraps with opposing defensive backs. You just are getting a lot of baggage with George Pickens. But if you're still able to win in spite of it, he's going to become a really potent weapon in this offense. I'm expecting him to have a 1,300-yard campaign, possibly lead the team in the NFL in touchdown receptions. Because when you have this kind of skill set where you can just go up and get it consistently, you should be able to be a touchdown machine. And that's the kind of skill set that George Pickens has. And if the Cowboys can make it work with him, they can, somewhat keep him composed, help him control his emotions. This is going to be a really good team this year.